Meet me by the lake, the billionaire CEO texted. Her fake girlfriend returned the ring. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's emotional story of two women whose carefully arranged relationship becomes something neither of them expected, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story from our channel. It is quick, it is free, and it helps us continue bringing you more heartfelt, dramatic and unforgettable stories about courage, healing, second chances, and love between women. Your support truly means the world to us. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now let us return to our main character and the moment a returned ring forced her to question everything she thought she understood about love. The ring was not what frightened me. It was the fact that Hannah had left it behind without asking for anything in return. At 6:17 on a Monday morning, I stood alone on the 62nd floor of Whitmore Technologies, staring at a diamond ring in the center of my desk. Manhattan was waking beneath the windows, all silver buildings and pale August sunlight, but my office felt unnaturally still. Beside the ring lay a folded piece of cream-colored paper. 7 words were written in Hannah Reid's familiar handwriting. You do not have to pretend anymore. I read them twice. Then a third time. My name is Claire Whitmore. I was 45 years old, founder and chief executive officer of a technology company valued at more than $12 billion. And until that morning I had believed there was almost nothing I could not solve. Markets collapsed. Investors panicked. Competitors threatened lawsuits. Employees made mistakes. Problems had numbers, causes, solutions. I had built my entire life around that certainty. But Hannah had left me 7 words, 1 ring, and no solution at all. I reached for my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Hannah, call me. My voice sounded colder than I intended, so I tried again. Please. That word felt strange coming from me. I sat down and picked up the ring. 6 months earlier, I had bought it because my public relations director said people believed photographs more easily when there was jewelry involved. Ridiculous, I had thought. Effective, she had replied. So I purchased the ring the way I purchased everything else. Quickly, decisively, without asking what it meant. Hannah had laughed when I first showed it to her. You bought a ring for a fake relationship? It makes the story convincing. To whom? Everyone. Her smile had faded for just a second. I noticed it then. I simply had not understood it. Now the memory hurt in a place I could not explain. I walked to the window and looked toward Central Park, but another landscape filled my mind instead. Quiet water, pine trees, an old wooden dock, Hannah sitting barefoot at the edge of the lake with her shoes beside her. That was where she had once asked me a question I refused to answer. Who are you when nobody needs Claire Whitmore to be powerful? At the time I thought it was sentimental nonsense. That morning, I would have traded every answer I had ever given in a boardroom for one chance to answer hers correctly. My phone remained silent. Then my assistant called. Claire, the board is waiting. I looked at Hannah's ring in my palm. For the first time in 23 years, I did not care that a board was waiting for me. Cancel it. There was a stunned pause. The entire meeting? Everything. I ended the call, opened my messages and typed the only words that felt true. Meet me by the lake. My thumb hovered over send. 6 months ago, Hannah Reid had been a stranger who told me no when everyone else said yes. Then she became my fake girlfriend. Somewhere along the way, without permission, without negotiation, and without a contract, she became home. And I had realized it one morning too late. 6 months earlier, Hannah Reid had looked me straight in the eyes and said the one word almost nobody said to me anymore. No, we were standing beneath white lights at a charity reception in Brooklyn, surrounded by donors, city officials, and people who laughed a little too loudly whenever I made a joke. I had attended because Whitmore Technologies was funding a redevelopment project nearby, and Hannah was there because her landscape architecture firm had designed the community garden sitting directly in the project's path. I knew nothing about her when she approached me except that she was 37, had calm gray-green eyes, and seemed completely unimpressed by the fact that 3 people had interrupted our conversation to shake my hand. Your development plan destroys the garden, she said. It relocates it, I corrected. For miles away. To a better property. Hannah tilted her head. Better for whom? I remember almost smiling. People usually brought me problems accompanied by apologies. Hannah brought me one like a challenge. What exactly do you want from me? I asked. Nothing. That answer caught me off guard. She wanted the garden protected because neighborhood families had spent years building it. Children grew tomatoes there. Retirees taught gardening classes there. People who lived in apartments without yards had somewhere green to gather. Hannah spoke about them without once mentioning what preserving the garden might do for her career. Before I could respond, a photographer approached. Hannah stepped beside me to let a server pass, and I instinctively placed a hand near her shoulder as we turned toward the camera. The photograph lasted perhaps 2 seconds. By breakfast the next morning it was everywhere. One business site called Hannah my mystery companion. Another claimed my notoriously private personal life had finally changed. My public relations director, Melissa Grant, entered my office looking happier than she had in months. Do not say it, I warned. Investors love this. You said it. They think you suddenly look human.
Esther daher.
I was human yesterday. Debatable. By noon, 3 board members had mentioned the photograph. We were approaching the most important merger in company history, and apparently the public found the possibility of Claire Whitmore being in love reassuring. I should have ignored the entire thing. Instead, I called Hannah. We met at a coffee shop near her office. She listened quietly while I explained that maintaining the appearance for 6 months could stabilize unwanted attention during the merger. You are asking me to pretend to be your girlfriend, temporarily, for money, a substantial amount. Hannah stirred her coffee, then pushed the contract back across the table without reading the final page. No, there was that word again. Name your price. I do not want your money. Everyone wants something. Her expression changed then, not angry, just disappointed. That might be the saddest thing you have said since we met. I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, what would make you agree? Hannah glanced through the window toward the neighborhood beyond it. Protect the community garden permanently. Put it in a land trust so your company cannot decide to develop it 5 years from now. I studied her, waiting for the hidden request. There was none. That is all. That is everything to the people who use it. For the first time in years, someone had been offered access to my wealth and chosen something for strangers instead. I extended my hand. 6 months. Hannah looked at it, then at me. 6 months. And we establish rules. I like rules. She finally shook my hand. Something tells me that is going to be our biggest problem. I laughed then, genuinely, before realizing I could not remember the last person who had made me do that. I thought I had just negotiated another agreement. I had no idea Hannah Reed had already begun changing the terms of my life. Our rules fit on one page, which should have been my first warning that Hannah understood people better than I did. Public appearances together when necessary. No discussing the arrangement with anyone outside my legal and public relations teams. No interference with each other's careers. No jealousy. No pretending when we were alone. Hannah added the last rule herself, circling it with my expensive fountain pen. If we are going to lie to everyone else, we should at least tell each other the truth. I agreed because it sounded reasonable. 3 weeks later, I discovered how dangerous honesty could be. Our first major appearance was a museum fundraiser in Manhattan. I arrived expecting Hannah to need instructions. Instead, she stepped from the elevator in a simple navy dress, greeted the event staff by name, and somehow remembered that the bartender had a daughter applying to college. Within 20 minutes, people who had spent years trying to impress me were trying to impress her. You are staring, Hannah whispered as photographers gathered near us. I am observing. That is billionaire language for staring. I almost laughed during a photograph, which Melissa later informed me was excellent for my image. After that came dinners, charity events, investor receptions, and one exhausting weekend conference in Boston. Somewhere between Manhattan and Massachusetts, Hannah began noticing things nobody on my payroll seemed to notice. She knew I drank coffee black before 8 in the morning but added cream after lunch. She recognized the slight movement of my hand when crowded rooms became too loud. She learned that when I said, I am fine, I usually meant, please stop asking questions because I do not know how to answer them. One evening after a 12-hour conference, I found a paper cup waiting outside my hotel suite. Black coffee. No note. No performance. Hannah was already inside her own room across the hall. I stood there holding that cup longer than any rational person should hold coffee. The arrangement changed again when I invited her to my lake house in the Adirondacks for a weekend photo opportunity, connected to a conservation fundraiser. The property sat nearly 5 hours north of Manhattan, surrounded by pine trees and water so still it reflected the sky like glass. After the photographers left, Hannah walked down to the old wooden dock and removed her shoes. "You can stop performing now," she called. "There is nobody here." I joined her reluctantly. The evening air smelled like pine and damp earth. For several minutes neither of us spoke. It should have been uncomfortable. It was not. "This is the quietest I have seen you," Hannah said. "I own a quiet house." "That is not what I meant." I looked across the lake. "What did you mean?" She studied me with that infuriating patience of hers. "When was the last time somebody loved Claire instead of needing Claire Whitmore?" The question landed somewhere deeper than I wanted it to. "People love me." I did not say they did not. "Then what are you asking?" Hannah looked back toward the water. "Who are you when nobody needs you to be powerful?" I had negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation, but I could not answer one landscape architect sitting barefoot beside a lake. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For once I ignored it. Hannah smiled faintly, as though that tiny decision told her something important. What frightened me was that it told me something too. Our contract said we were supposed to tell each other the truth when nobody was watching. Sitting beside Hannah in the fading light, I realized there was one truth I was already beginning to hide. The photograph that changed everything was taken 3 weeks after our weekend at the lake. Hannah and I were leaving a charity dinner in Manhattan when a reporter called out, "Claire, is this serious?" Normally, I would have ignored him. Instead, I looked at Hannah. She looked back at me, and for one careless second, neither of us remembered to perform. By morning, that photograph was everywhere. Melissa entered my office carrying her tablet and the expression she wore when public attention became useful. "People believe you are in love." I kept reading an earnings report. People believe many things. The merger vote is 6 weeks away. The board wants stability, and this relationship is helping. Then she placed a small velvet box on my desk. I stared at it. Absolutely not. It does not need to be an engagement ring. It only needs to suggest commitment. I should have refused. Instead, 2 days later, I walked into a private jewelry showroom on 5th Avenue and purchased a diamond ring that cost more than Hannah had earned during her first year as a landscape architect. That evening, I brought it to her apartment in Brooklyn. Hannah opened the box and stared at me. Then she laughed. "You bought a ring for a fake relationship? Apparently photographs require accessories now. How romantic." "It is strategic." She lifted the ring carefully. "How much did this cost?" "That is irrelevant." "Which means too much." I reached for her hand. For some reason, my confidence disappeared the moment our eyes met. I slid the ring onto her finger. Fit perfectly. Hannah stopped smiling. "Does it mean anything to you?" The sensible answer would have been yes. The honest answer might have changed everything. Instead, I retreated into the language that had protected me for years. "It only has to mean something to everyone else." Her expression barely changed, but I saw the disappointment. I always saw it. I simply kept choosing not to understand it. The following weekend, we returned to the lake house for another conservation event. After the guests left, Hannah curled up in the window seat overlooking the water while I answered emails. "Claire," she said softly, "the world will survive without you for one evening. That theory has not been tested." "Test it." I closed my laptop. We made grilled cheese in a kitchen designed for private chefs, and Hannah laughed when I burned mine. Later, she fell asleep by the window with a book resting against her chest. The ring caught the warm light from the lamp. I stood across the room looking at her and felt something unfamiliar settle over me. Not excitement. Not fear exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt dangerously close to peace. I imagined the house without Hannah after our 6-month agreement ended. The thought made the room seem colder. My phone vibrated with a message from Melissa about the merger. I turned it face down. Then Hannah shifted in her sleep and murmured my name. Just my name. Not Chief Executive Officer. Not Ms. Whitmore. Claire. I sat beside her and watched the dark lake beyond the glass. For years, I had measured value in numbers because numbers could not disappoint me. Revenue. Growth. Market share. Hannah had asked whether the ring meant anything to me, and I had given her the safest answer possible. Sitting there beside the woman who had somehow made silence feel like home, I finally understood the truth. The ring meant nothing. The woman wearing it meant far too much. The strangest part was that Hannah never asked me to change. She simply lived as though the version of me hidden beneath the title was already worth knowing. 2 weeks after our second weekend at the lake, she came to my apartment carrying a paper bag from a neighborhood bakery and found me staring at an unanswered message from my mother. "How long has that been sitting there?" she asked. 3 days. "And how long since you called her?" 4 months. Hannah placed the bag on my kitchen counter. Why? I could have blamed work. Instead, I told the truth. My mother and I had become experts at loving each other from a distance. She thought I had sacrificed too much of myself to build Whitmore Technologies. I thought she had never understood what building it required. Hannah listened without interrupting. Then she handed me my phone. "Call her. You make everything sound simple." "No. I just think some difficult things are still worth doing." I called. My mother answered on the second ring. Our conversation lasted 11 minutes, awkward at first, then softer. Before hanging up, she said, "I miss you, Claire." I stared at the phone after the call ended. Hannah pretended to be fascinated by the pastries until I was ready to speak. "Thank you," I said. "You made the call." That was Hannah. She never claimed credit for doors she merely helped me find. A few days later, I visited the Brooklyn Community Garden alone. Children were painting wooden signs while older residents planted late-season herbs. Nobody recognized me without the usual entourage. I stood near the entrance and understood, finally, why Hannah had refused my money. The garden was not valuable because of what the land was worth. It was valuable because people belonged there. The next morning, I instructed our attorneys to transfer the property into a permanent community land trust. I also prohibited Whitmore Technologies from putting its name on the garden. When Hannah discovered what I had done, she came into my office holding the documents. "You could have turned this into a publicity campaign." I considered it. "Of course you did." She smiled. "Why did you change your mind?" I thought about the people planting herbs beneath the morning sun. Because not everything good needs my name attached to it. Hannah became very quiet. That evening we ate takeout at her apartment instead of attending another polished dinner. She told me about her father, a public school teacher who had spent 34 years teaching science and growing vegetables behind their small house in Pennsylvania. "He used to say love is what remains when nobody is watching," she said. The sentence followed me home. After that, our arrangement became harder to define. Hannah left a spare umbrella in my office because I always forgot mine. I kept her favorite tea in my kitchen. She sent photographs of strange trees she found during site visits. I began calling her without needing a reason. Sometimes we spoke for an hour. Sometimes neither of us had much to say, and somehow that felt even more intimate. One Sunday morning at the lake house, I woke before sunrise and found Hannah on the dock wrapped in a sweater, watching mist drift across the water. I sat beside her. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved away. 3 months left, she said quietly. I knew exactly what she meant. I know. What happens then? There were 100 answers I could have given. Extend the agreement. End it. Renegotiate. Instead, I watched the sun turn the lake gold and felt fear tighten around the truth I still could not say. Hannah had taught me that love was what remained when nobody was watching. My problem was becoming painfully clear. Nobody was watching us now, and I no longer knew which part was supposed to be pretend. The truth might have stayed safely between Hannah and me if someone had not found the contract. It happened on a Thursday morning, 11 weeks before the merger was scheduled to close. I entered the boardroom expecting questions about revenue projections and found 12 people sitting in complete silence. Melissa stood near the windows with a printed document in her hand. I recognized the first page immediately. 6-month personal relationship agreement. My stomach dropped. Where did you get that? I asked. Our board chairman, Robert Caldwell, removed his glasses. The relevant question is whether it is authentic. I looked around the table. People who had trusted me with billions of dollars were suddenly studying me as though I were a liability on a spreadsheet. Yes, I said. It is authentic. The room erupted with questions. Had investors been deliberately misled? Did Hannah receive compensation? Could the photographs be considered part of a coordinated publicity strategy? Was the relationship entirely fabricated? I answered carefully until Robert asked the only question that mattered. What exactly is Hannah Reid to you? I should have stopped. I should have remembered the lake, the burned grilled cheese, the black coffee outside my hotel room, the garden, my mother saying she missed me. Instead, I saw the merger slipping away. I saw headlines, lawsuits, employees frightened about their jobs. 23 years of work suddenly felt balanced on the next sentence out of my mouth. So I became the woman I had always known how to be. Controlled, efficient, untouchable. Hannah was part of a business arrangement, I said. Nothing more. Silence followed. Then I saw movement through the glass wall behind Robert. Hannah stood outside the conference room. She was holding 2 coffees. One black, one with cream. Her eyes met mine, and I knew immediately how much she had heard. Hannah. I stood so quickly my chair rolled backward. She placed the coffees on my assistant's desk and walked toward the elevators. I followed. Please wait. She pressed the call button. How long were you standing there? It was a terrible question. I knew it as soon as I asked it. Hannah gave a small, tired smile. Long enough. You do not understand what was happening. I understand exactly what happened. The merger affects thousands of employees. I know. Then you know why I had to protect the company. The elevator doors opened, but she did not step inside. She looked at me with tears in her eyes that never fell. Somehow that was worse. I never asked you not to protect your company, Claire. Then what are you asking? Nothing anymore. My chest tightened. Hannah, what I said in there was not the whole truth. That is the problem. When telling the truth became expensive, you chose the version that cost you the least. I had no answer. She glanced at the ring on her hand. Do you remember? Asking me to tell you the truth when nobody was watching. You made that rule. And I believed you would eventually understand it. The elevator chimed again. This time Hannah stepped inside. I reached toward the door but stopped myself. Please do not leave like this. Her expression softened for one heartbreaking second. I love you, Claire. Everything inside me went still. That is why I cannot stay somewhere I am only real in private. The doors closed between us. I stood there staring at my reflection in polished metal, hearing the words I had wanted for months and realizing I had received them at the exact moment I had made them impossible to keep. I returned to the boardroom because that was what Claire Whitmore always did. I finished the meeting. I protected the merger. I answered every question. But when I arrived at my office the next morning at 6:17, Hannah's ring was waiting on my desk beside 7 handwritten words. You do not have to pretend anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I tried to solve a problem with money and discovered that money was the problem. Hannah ignored my calls until Sunday afternoon, when she finally agreed to meet me at a small coffee shop near the community garden. I arrived 15 minutes early. She arrived exactly on time, wearing a gray sweater and carrying none of the nervous energy that had been consuming me for 3 days. You have 20 minutes, she said. I immediately made my first mistake. I want to compensate you for everything that happened. Hannah stared at me. Compensate me? The agreement created circumstances neither of us anticipated. I can increase the original amount. I never took the original amount. Then let me fund your firm. You told me you wanted to expand. No, I felt frustration rising, not because she was difficult, but because every tool I had used successfully for 23 years had become useless. I could purchase a property for your new office. No, Hannah, please tell me what you want. She looked at me for several quiet seconds. You still think there is a transaction here? That sentence stopped me. I am trying to make this right. You are trying to make the discomfort disappear. I looked down at my untouched coffee. She was right and I hated how quickly I knew it. Hannah leaned forward slightly. I never wanted more from you, Claire. I wanted more of you. The coffee shop seemed to fade around us. You had me. No, I had the version of you that appeared when it was safe. At the lake. In my apartment. When nobody important was watching. Her voice remained gentle. Then the cost went up, and you decided I was expendable. You were never expendable. But your choice made me feel that way. I wanted to argue. Instead, for once I listened. Hannah told me she had accepted a 6-month project with an environmental design firm in Seattle. She was leaving New York in 9 days. The news struck with terrifying simplicity. You are moving? Temporarily. Because of me? Because I need to remember who I was before I started waiting for you to decide whether I mattered. I had negotiated with executives who threatened to walk away from billion-dollar deals. I knew how to create leverage, how to extend deadlines, how to make leaving more expensive than staying. But sitting across from Hannah, I understood that using any of those skills would only prove her point. I am sorry, I said. The words felt painfully small. I know. I love you. Hannah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was sadness there, but also kindness. I believe you. Hope rose too quickly. Then stay. She shook her head. Loving someone does not automatically make staying with them healthy. I had no defense against that truth. Hannah stood and pulled on her coat. You once asked what I wanted from you. I think I finally know. What? Become someone who can tell the truth even when it costs something. Not for me. For yourself. She left before I could answer. That evening, I went to my office and sat alone beside the windows until Manhattan became a field of lights below me. Hannah's ring remained locked in my desk. I could have called her again. I could have sent flowers, a car, an airplane, anything money could arrange. Instead, I opened the merger documents and stared at the statement I had approved about our relationship. Then I deleted it. The next morning, I told Melissa and the board that I would correct the public record, even if it endangered the merger. For once, I was not making a decision to bring Hannah back. I was making it because she had shown me the difference between protecting what I owned and becoming worthy of what I loved. 8 days remained before her flight to Seattle, and for the first time, I understood that Hannah might leave anyway. The board gave me 48 hours to reconsider, which was their polite way of telling me not to destroy a multi-billion-dollar merger over a woman who was leaving for Seattle. I did not need 48 hours. At 9 the next morning, I released a statement admitting that my relationship with Hannah had begun as a private arrangement created during an intense period of public scrutiny. Then I added the sentence my attorneys had strongly advised me to remove. Somewhere along the way, my feelings became real, and when honesty became inconvenient, I failed someone I deeply cared about. Whitmore Technologies stock dipped before lunch. 2 board members called me reckless. Robert Caldwell asked whether I understood what I had risked. For once, the answer was simple. Yes. By evening, something unexpected happened. The merger did not collapse. Investors asked difficult questions, but they did not run. Employees sent messages thanking me for telling the truth. My mother called and said, I am proud of you, then wisely changed the subject before I could become uncomfortable. None of it brought Hannah back. 6 days passed. I did not call her. I did not send gifts. I did not ask Melissa to find out where she was. I kept my promise to myself and let Hannah choose her own distance. On the 7th evening, I drove north alone. No driver. No assistant. No schedule waiting in my inbox. Nearly 5 hours later, I reached the lake house beneath a sky heavy with rain. The place felt different without Hannah. Too large. Too perfect. Too quiet. I walked down to the dock where she had once asked who I was when nobody needed me to be powerful. My phone was in my hand. I typed 3 words, erased them, typed them again, then finally sent the message. Meet me by the lake. Nothing else. No explanation. No promise. No request to forgive me. I sat at the end of the dock and waited. 20 minutes became 40. The wind moved across the water, carrying the scent of pine and approaching rain. At 1 hour, I almost checked my phone. I stopped myself. Hannah did not owe me an answer. That realization hurt, but it also felt necessary. Rain began softly, tapping against the wooden boards. I remembered the first contract, the rules, the ring, the mornings when she knew how I wanted my coffee. I remembered her father's words. Love is what remains when nobody is watching. Nobody was watching now. There were no cameras, investors, reporters, or board members. There was only a 45-year-old woman sitting beside a darkening lake, finally understanding that love did not become real because it was returned. It was real because you chose to honor it even when you might lose. Another hour passed. Hannah was not coming. Strangely, I did not feel angry. I felt grateful that she had taught me something before leaving. I stood, slipped my phone into my coat pocket, and whispered into the rain, "I hope Seattle is good to you." Then I turned toward the house. That was when I heard footsteps on the wet dock behind me. I froze. For several seconds I was afraid to turn around because hope had become something I no longer believed I was entitled to. "Claire." Her voice was quiet, familiar, unmistakable. I turned. Hannah stood 20 feet away beneath a dark green umbrella, her travel bag resting near her feet. My heart seemed to forget its rhythm. "You came." She looked toward the lake, then back at me. "My flight leaves tomorrow morning." I nodded, forcing myself not to interpret her presence as forgiveness. "I know." Hannah stepped closer. "Then why did you ask me here?" I reached into my coat and closed my fingers around the ring I had carried from New York. But I did not take it out. "Not yet. Because the last time we sat here, you asked me a question I could not answer." Hannah waited. Rain whispered across the lake behind her. I finally understood that this moment was not about convincing her to stay. It was about telling the truth even if she still chose to leave. "I think I finally know who Claire is when nobody needs her to be powerful." Hannah stood beneath the umbrella without saying anything, and for once I did not rush to fill the silence. "I am someone who loves you," I said. "Not because you make me look better. Not because you make my life easier. And not because I expect loving you to make you stay." Her eyes softened, but she remained still. I reached into my coat and took out the ring. Rain shimmered across the diamond beneath the dock light. This was supposed to convince strangers that something between us was real. I placed it on the wooden railing between us. "I do not want you to take it back." Hannah looked surprised. "You do not?" "No. That ring belongs to the lie we started with. If we ever have something real, I do not want it built on that." For several seconds only the rain answered. Then Hannah closed her umbrella and sat beside me at the edge of the dock. I sat too, leaving enough space for her to choose whether that distance remained. "I saw your statement," she said. "The board hated it. I assumed they would." The stock dropped. It recovered most of the loss. Hannah gave me a familiar look. "Still measuring everything." I smiled. "I am learning slowly." She smiled too, and that tiny expression felt more valuable than every favorable headline I had received in 23 years. "I meant what I said," Hannah continued. "I love you, but love does not erase what happened." "I know. And I am still going to Seattle tomorrow." The old Claire would have immediately searched for an argument. The woman sitting beside Hannah simply nodded. "Then I hope you build something beautiful there." She studied me carefully. "You are not going to ask me to stay?" "I want you to stay more than I know how to explain. But wanting you is not the same as owning your choice." Hannah reached across the space between us and took my hand. "That might be the first truly romantic thing you have ever said." I laughed through tears I had stopped trying to hide. She left for Seattle the next morning. We did not promise forever. We promised honesty. Over the next 6 months that became harder and more meaningful than any contract we had signed. We talked almost every night. I visited twice. Hannah came home for Thanksgiving and spent an awkward but wonderful afternoon with my mother. Meanwhile, the Brooklyn Garden became an independent nonprofit managed by a community board, with Hannah advising its expansion from 3,000 miles away. I learned to leave work before dark sometimes. I learned to apologize without attaching an explanation. Most importantly, I learned that becoming better was not a performance designed to win Hannah back. 1 year after that rainy night, Hannah and I returned to the lake. This time there were no photographers and no public relations strategy. We sat on the same dock while autumn leaves reflected across the water. I reached into my pocket and removed a small velvet box. Hannah laughed softly. "Claire, this one is different." Inside was a simple ring, far less expensive than the first. Hannah looked from it to me. "What does this one mean?" I remembered the terrible answer I had given her a year earlier. I took her hand but did not put the ring on it. The choice had to remain hers. Nothing to anyone else, I said. Everything to me. Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then she held out her hand. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, I finally understood something no balance sheet had ever taught me. Power was not making someone stay. Love was creating enough safety, honesty, and freedom that they could leave, then being grateful beyond words when they chose to stay.